Okay, so hi, we're back. It's a new day, and I'm going to be continuing with this presentation. The next thing I want to talk about is a lot of the thematic elements and kind of I'm just going to be talking about these broadly, not really going into them that much, but sort of how these also pose an argument for Sydcarmy. Yeah, how the thematic elements of the bear pose an argument for Sydcarmy. Next slide. Okay, so one of the arguments of the show, or one of the questions of the show, as I mentioned, through their dynamics, is what does a partnership mean? Like, is this someone that you only see at the restaurant? Is it someone you see outside the restaurant? Is it someone that you're friends with? Is it someone that you only work with? And that like directly plays into the two of their relationship over the seasons and sort of like um dealing with this question. We even see that at the end of season 4 where they're like, are we partners? Are we friends? Are we both? Are we neither? What is it? Another question that's posed throughout the season is like, what is peace? Can you like find peace if you're like in a chaotic environment? And like, who is actually the person giving you peace? Do you have to find that in yourself, or is it possible to find that through other people? And that kind of ties into like the mental health journey that Carmi goes on throughout the show, especially considering he like kind of had some trauma from his past, like both from his mother, as I mentioned, and also from his like abusive boss, David Shields. So yeah, that's another question, and we see subliminally or not subliminally, um, Sydney kind of actually gives him peace, but that's a whole other conversation. Again, we mentioned like found family and being able to create a family for yourself, which in the end, like at least up until these 4 seasons, it's clear that Sydney and Carmy are family to each other. Another question is like idolization and the consequences of perfection. We see at the very beginning, Sydney comes in because she thinks that Carmy is like this great, amazing chef, and that's why she wants to come to work at the restaurant. She's tried his food, and she said, "I need to work with this person." Like she jumps at the first opportunity to do so. He was like a very successful chef. I think one of the things they mentioned is like he got like a James Beard Award, which is like this really like prestigious, at least in the fine dining world, award for cooking, best new chef. At 21 years old, so there's like a lot of accolades that he has. So at first, Sydney kind of like idolizes him, but throughout the season, it kind of switches to where the point where um, Carmy kind of like idolizes Sydney in some ways. Like, there's the conversation, the alley scene. I didn't mention this line, but there is one time when he says um, like you're better. Like he don't. I don't know if he says you're better. You're everything I'm never going to be. Like you allow yourself to feel things, and he kind of talks about like Sydney being like the best version that he could ever be. And he also like looked at her a lot. I don't know if you noticed in the montage, but like there's a lot of moments that of him looking at her and her mentorship. Like he's seeing her as someone that is a leader, or he maybe isn't as good of a leader as her. Again, there's like the definition of success, like is this Michelin star the definition of success? Is having a successful restaurant a definition of success? Do we need to like have accolades? Should we be like making money? Like what does it mean to be successful? That's another question. And they kind of like formally introduced this idea in season 4, but it kind of been played. If you look, it's been I guess implied throughout the other seasons. I'll say if you want like a in-depth look, you can definitely look on Tumblr. Well, I don't actually have Tumblr. I use Toonlook to see Tumblr posts. So I get like half of Tumblr basically. But someone actually like talked about Groundhog Day and the concept of like repeating the same day over and over again before season 4 came out. And then the first episode of season 4 is called Groundhog Day. And Carmi talks about this idea of him being stuck in a loop, like he can't move forward or he can't get out of the loop. So yeah, it's like how do you move forward when there are still things like holding you back, whether that's grief. Um, Sydney also, of course, like has this grief from her mother passing. And it's kind of like again that mental health journey that comes back with both of them. And if they're able to like talk to each other about that, Because really the whole restaurant stems from grief. Like Carmen coming to the restaurant stems from the grief of Michael passing. There are like the ideas of if you can forgive people, which we do see in like season one. We see in season two as well. Like Sydney kind of giving Kirby chances and him saying like, "I'm sorry, like I want to be better," but maybe actions not necessarily moving in alignment with that. At least until season four, where we do see like a shift in Carmi's actions to actually try to be better. And then yeah, I guess there's this concept that the show mentions called every second counts, which is like the idea that um like in the restaurant you need to make sure that everything you're doing matters because every second that we're here counts. Every second counts. Um but yeah, like are you making use of your time? Are you going to like contribute to the restaurant well, or are you going to like go off and hang out with your girl that's a friend. So stuff like that. So it's kind of interesting and to consider that dynamic as it translates to like spending time outside of the restaurant versus within the restaurant. And then I guess the last thing I'll mention is like the timing of everything and how I mentioned like the red string theory that's like kind of aligned with this. But basically it's the idea that like everything is leading to like people are I guess people are intrinsically connected through this red string or through I don't know if it's God or whatever. Sort of like placing people in the same environments that eventually they will meet. And we do see this with Sydney and Carmy. The one, as I mentioned earlier, like the one dish he made in an act of rebellion ends up being served to Sydney. She sees this, she knows Carmy, she knows his career. Um, that ends up this leads her to want to seek him out again, and she sees like we're both from Chicago and he's actually coming back to Chicago, so she decides to work in this beef restaurant. um and eventually they end up creating the bear, which is the dream that Carmy and Michael had together, or specifically Carmy wanting to do something with his brother. But yeah, like Sydney and Carmy are able to me and create this project and this dream that Carmy and Michael had. And you could say in some ways it only happened due to Michael passing. So it's like this interesting, we're always connected and what can draw two people together. And if this is in fact intentional, which I think it is. Next slide. So then we're going to talk a little bit about parallels. Yeah, and like callbacks as well throughout the show. So one of the main parallels in the show is like the idea of who is your best friend. Again, yeah, it does tie back to the Allie argument in season four, like I'm your partner, I'm your friend. Because there's this argument, in fact, he's one of the characters, he's kind of like a not helpful handyman, basically, for the bear. But he says, like, I'm Carmi's best friend. And he'll like reiterate that concept like multiple times throughout the seasons. But it's not clear like if Kermie's best friend is actually Fack or if Fack is just self-proclaiming with it and everybody's running with that. At the same time, sorry, you might hear background noise. At the same time, this character named Luca, who's like Carmy's, he's kind of like a self-actualized version of Carmy, but he asks Sydney, whether it's in like a flirty way or not, I'm not really sure. I personally have a headcanon, as in my personal thoughts in my brain, for what I hope would be correct, that Luca is gay. And I do have evidence for this. But specifically, I think Luca, I serve him with Marcus, but that's a whole other thing. But anyway, like, Luca and Sydney are having a conversation, and Luca asks her, like, who's your best friend? Like, do you have someone that's there for you? And she's like, my dad. And then he's like, is there anyone else? And you see like Sydney kind of thinking about it, but she doesn't end up answering because their conversation gets cut off. So yeah, it's like who, and I don't know, I feel like the implication is that maybe Sydney and Carmi are best friends, but they never actually um like will say that to each other like face to face. Like it's never confirmed, I guess. Which could imply, I feel like best friend is a form of closeness. They say like friendship is the foundation. best foundation for relationships and all that, but it does again speak to the closeness of their relationship. And then another main one, I will be talking about Claire and Sydney. There's like a lot of parallels between Claire and Sydney, and I have to assume that it's intentional because the amount of them there are, it's just like it seems like it would get to a point, you know? And especially for a show that talks about being very intentional and music choices and like um cinematography and all of that, it seems like they're doing this on purpose. So I guess the one, yeah, a pretty early example of this would be the girlfriend montage. As I mentioned, um, Sydney has this like conversation with Carmen who's like, you have to decide if Claire is your girlfriend or a girl that's a friend. And in the end, Carmen decides at the end of the episode, um, like by the end of that workday, after we talk to Sydney, okay, I'm gonna call my girlfriend. So after that, we see this montage, and you're like, okay, I guess Hermie's gonna like make food for his girlfriend. But throughout this, they pan to like Claire working in the restaurant, and they pan to Carmy picking out stuff at the grocery store, and then they'll cut to Sydney sitting by herself, and you're like, why is Sydney in this montage? Then they'll cut again to like Carmy starting to cook and Claire like saying bye to her work colleagues, and then they'll cut to Sydney, like getting off the train, like getting in her apartment. Then it cuts to I'm probably getting the order wrong, but it's like this repeated cutting between them, and it cuts to like um Sydney like masked in blue taking off her shirt um I guess after the workday, and you see like a tattoo on her right shoulder, which is in the slide right here, and it's like a three of swords tattoo, which is like a part of what's it called, it's like tarot cards, and like the three of swords is like a tattoo representing like heartbreak or like this disenchantment with the world, like feeling like betrayal kind of. And then we cut back to Claire and Carmy, um and you see like Carmy actually has made this lamb ragu dish for Claire, for them to eat, and it like ends with them kissing or whatever. And it's very interesting because shout out to Chef Kids, who's like a Tumblr person, but she pointed out that the dish that like Carmy makes for her, for Claire, is the same dish that in episode 2 of season 2, Sydney talks to Carmy about making. She's like, I had this really, really good dish, like it was going great, like lamb ragu, but I didn't have any fresh pasta. But then you see Carmy deciding to make that dish for Claire, um, within this montage of I gotta call my girlfriend, which also includes Sydney. So it's very interesting. Like the way they paint it, it's like um I don't know, like they're trying to say like I feel like the implication is that Sydney is also part of this like role. Whether she's whether she's alone because she is like it seems like Carmi is her boyfriend, or if it's just that Sydney is being like left out of like a dynamic, or like being betrayed in some sense, which is still interesting because they're supposed to be working on this restaurant together, but he's spending time with Claire instead of Sydney, you know. And then again, like across the seasons, there's like a comparison between like a lot of Sydney and Carmi scenes. They're like very warm. Like you see a lot of windows open, you see a lot of sunlight, and the scenes are well lit. But then a lot of the um Carmi and Claire scenes, at least that are like extended scenes, they're mostly in like a dark, dark, deep blue. For example, like season 2 when they have their moments at the beginning of episode 9 omelet, it's like completely in blue, and you see them like mm, they just like change who's okay, they're doing the thing, but it's not explicit or anything, but you see like they're masked in blue, and it's like really hard to see. I don't know if that's supposed to be for intimacy or what, but it seems like very dark, you know. And then in like season 3 there's like a moment where Claire and Carmi are talking outside, like in this really like dark alleyway, and it's really hard to see them again. Um, but we see like them talking and having a conversation, like um Carmi's like, oh, like I hate Sundays because there's nothing to do. That's a whole other thing. But anyway, they're like having this conversation. It's supposed to be like an intimate moment, but again, it's like shrouded in like the darkest blue, and it seems like kind of dark, like yeah, maybe it's closeness, but it's there's like the lighting suggests that there's like a coldness to it, I guess. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting to contrast like Sydney and Carmy scenes to Claire and Carmy scenes in that way. We also have like evidence of like Claire being mirrored to Donna, who is like Carmy's low-key abusive mother, um, in that she kind of like manipulated, and she was going through her own mental health struggles. She's like alcoholic, maybe like mental conditions as well, but she kind of has trouble like um dealing with her emotions, I guess, or like regulating her emotions, and she did like kind of take that out on her children. But there's like this whole argument of like being out in the cold, and like the first time we meet Carmi and Claire, or the first time they interact, like Claire's in the refrigerator section and they're like looking at each other through like a refrigerator window. We then later in the season, like we cut to Donna being outside in the cold, and she's like, it's so cold out here. I don't want to come in and like ruin things for my children. So yeah, I think that's an interesting parallel. Um there's also like a couple cuts, yeah, where it like will just randomly cut between Sydney and Carmy in the scene. I mean, sorry, Sydney and Claire across scenes. Like it'll just be very jarring. Of course, I can't not mention that episode 9 starts out with Carmy and Claire doing something, and then it ends with like metaphorically or literally Sydney and Carmy doing the same exact thing. So that's another like parallel between them. Um, and yeah, there's like moments in season 4 as well, like the camera will pan from like Carmy looking at Sydney, or looking at Claire, or dancing with Claire, and then it cuts to Carmy looking at Sydney, her like always talking about her. He like mentions her when he's with Claire as well. And then the real kicker is like this moment, the statement, because you're the bear. In season 2, when the first time Claire and Carmy are seeing each other, um, she talks about like, oh, I'm so excited for you because you're creating the restaurant. And he's like, we didn't tell you about that. Like, what was the name? And like, she's like, no, I love the name. And there's like this statement, like, how could he said like Carmi's like, how could you remember the name? And Claire's like, because you're the bear and I remember you. So like originally they're like, oh, this is like a sweet moment, like, wow, she remembers the name of the restaurant, like the bear. But then and it's clear that like they're pairing them romantically from that point. But then later on in season 4, Carly says to Sydney, because you're the bear. So it's interesting that um a statement that's used like in a romantic lens previously is now being used in a romantic lens again. Um Hold on a second, I'm getting a phone call. Okay, brief intermission. It's probably about my appointment. Okay, so okay, we're back. So then, uh, um, again, there's like a lack of communication that Carmi has with other people. He's very bad at communicating. So is Sydney, but like he's worse basically. Like he won't talk to his family for like years. But then like to contrast that, like we even see that in season 1, he can't go without talking to Sydney for like a day or two max, because he like texts her right away. And even like he after like Sydney ignores him during the service, he's like, you ignored me all service, like I don't like how this feels. So like kind of an understanding that he actually needs to be in contact with Sydney, while he can like ignore people, including like Claire, including Richie. Like they were arguing the entire of season 3 and most of season 4 as well. And then lastly, I just want to mention that there's like this one special place we see in season one, I think it's episode 3 or so. Carmy goes to this beach and he's wearing this blue hat and he like goes out to look at the, I think it's maybe like Michigan or something. Nope, it's not like Michigan. He goes out to the beach. We're not in Michigan, we're in Chicago. But he goes out to like this beach and he like looks over the water and that like works as a way to calm him down. Then later we see Sydney in the same outfit. I included a clip from like an edit by I think it's E Gravy. She's T, but she hasn't been posting really. She's a TikToker that makes Sydcarmy edits, but she like mirror shows the mirror of like Sydney going to the beach. She wears her blue hat and she's staring at the water. So it's interesting that we get this like parallel of what they do to calm down as well. So then to continue on, we're just going to talk about a couple more. I'll try to go quicker. Of course, there's like the fire and water parallels. We see this mainly through dreams, but also through their actions. Carmy is really like very much associated with fire. He dreams of um like burning the kitchen down. He talks about like I really wish like I could burn the kitchen down and all my anxiety would go away. He mentions like burning his hand, like it was kind of like a form of self-harm, but like he was trying to like regulate his emotions and he like intentionally put his hand on the burner. Um there's like this moment where he's even like cooking food and it catches on fire and he's like cooking in his sleep. But then to contrast that, we have Sydney who also has a dream in a kitchen setting, like hosting a kitchen show. But in her case, instead of fire being the main element, um, water is the main element. So it's kind of interesting having like Sydney and Carmy have like contrasting forces, like elements, end up like that can like neutralize each other out is kind of interesting because it implies that like they can like regulate each other in some sort of way. Yeah, I also mentioned that like he Carmen talks to Claire and he's like, when I was with you it felt like I was on fire, and that to me is a red flag. Claire sees it as a red flag as well, but he's like, no, no, it was great. But we all know that being on fire is not a good thing. It's not. So yeah. Um okay, yeah, I mentioned that. And then oh yeah, I guess it is interesting to note that season 4 or season 5 takes place over a storm. So it's kind of going to be like Sydney's dream coming to life. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and like if in this case like Carmen will be the one calming Sydney down. Um which you can apply might already happen from the first trailer that we saw for season 5. We also have some parallel tattoos that they have. I showed a picture of Sydney's tattoos on the previous page, but like they both have like a sardine tattoo. They both have um like a fish, like a yeah, like fish as I mentioned. They both have like a knife stabbing through an item tattoo. And then there's like this idea of a wishbone. Sydney has a wishbone tattoo, and there have been like multiple moments throughout the show where a wishbone is mentioned as like being an important element to consider within like prepping for cooking chicken. We see like Carmen like take out like a wishbone, whether that's like hurriedly or with care. So it's interesting that they both have like this wishbone connection. And then the last thing I want to talk about is like they do calm each other down. I mentioned it through like the panic attack scene specifically, but there are also other instances. For example, Carmi like can't open his letter from Michael until he has called or he has talked to Sydney, which is interesting. Then there's like many moments where Sydney calms Carmy down. For example, she's like, you need to take it way down when he starts to get like agitated after thinking he's seen his abusive chef in the opening of Friends and Family in season 2. Sydney's like, I'm not your babysitter. Like, you need to calm down. I'm not your babysitter. You need to calm down. And Carmy does in season 3, episode 3. There's later when Sydney, of course, gets that call from her dad, or about her dad being in the hospital, Carmy sort of like calms her down, and then later on, like the next episode, he like checks on her again. He's like, "I'm thinking about you." She's like, "I appreciate you," and it's kind of like a nice moment of them like reaching out to each other and like being able to like show the care that they have for each other. And then yeah, there is this one montage of like in season 4 where it's not even a montage, it's just like a cutting between scenes of two people at a time. They'll have Marcus and Luca talking about something or like connecting over a menu, and then they'll have like Jess and Richie, who is another ship on the show, talking about the menu or like being close in contact, and they'll cut to like Sydney and Carmy also talking about the menu and being in close contact, and they just like cut between these three scenes in their conversation. So it's interesting, just like in terms of pairing people together, maybe there's an implication to that. Okay, so then I'm briefly going to talk about some gestures. I consider them romantic, but it's just gestures to show that they care about each other. For example, we have um, the Tom Brown chef coat, customized, engraved with Sydney's initials. That right? It's interesting the placement of that scene. It happens right after the under the table scene. They like have this really intimate conversation, and they're like, "Oh, yeah," like they come out from underneath the table, and Carmi's like, "I actually want to give you something." Like, Carmi, what is this? But he ends up giving her like these customized Tom Brown chef coats. Meanwhile, you know those are not inexpensive. You know those are expensive. Um, because obviously it's Tom Brown, luxury brand. But yeah, it's like it's interesting because part of it is just I think Christopher Stewart he just likes the brand Tom Brown, but Sydney was wearing like Tom Brown on her first day of work, and Carmy like notices that Sydney likes his like chef coat and season 2 episode 2 pasta. So it's just like a amount of care where you notice someone likes something and then you literally buy it for them, you know. Carmy also like prep her like diet like her daily coke before service starts. That's like a moment in season 3. Um, Another thing is like again in season 3, Sydney like makes the margins wider in their like prep documents, and he's like, "Oh, like who did this or why'd you do this?" And she's like, "'Cause you write in the margins." And not just like the again like the act of someone made this quote. It was like, no, the act of loving someone is knowing them, something like that. And it just shows that they know each other and know what each other likes, and they will do actions to like help that. Again, another moment is like Carmi has been using this one spoon as like a coping mechanism. He always has this spoon. It's like a stress ball to him. But in season 4, like you can see the middle picture I have is like um a moment from season 1 when he uses this spoon and he'll like point with it and like tap with it and stuff. But in season 4, he ends up giving Sydney that exact spoon. So it's just like passing on like a thing that's important to him onto her. Um, Again, he like will talk constantly and check in with Sydney. He'll be like, "You good?" Whether or not they're actually good is a whole other thing, but like he constantly tries to like check in with her, which is like something he doesn't do with other people. And it's also interesting because there is the context of like Carmi having a conversation with his sister Natalie about how it's really hard for him to like check in with people, partially because it's hard for him to identify how he's feeling, but also because if he can identify how he's feeling, it's like really weird for him to ask how other people are feeling if he doesn't even know his own emotions. So yeah, that's like that top left picture I included there. And then yeah, he also constantly like checks in. He's like asking like, "How's your dad doing? How's your mom?" Before he knows that Sydney's mom has passed, and he just like asks about her even when she's not around. And they also do talk positively of each other when they're not around. For example, like Sydney giving like a really just like a lot of compliments about Carmy to Donna when she ends up interacting with her at the wedding during season 4, episode 7. And then you can read this side note, but yeah, there was like a really interesting Christmas commercial, which kind of gave the implication that like I'm not reading into it, maybe I am too much, but like there's like an implication that like watching the bear led to this family forming. And it's like a Christmas Disney Plus commercial, so it's kind of funny. But yeah, that's a whole other thing. Next slide. So then I'm just going to talk about my ideas for the finale, like what I would like to happen, though they probably won't. I really need them to happen, but they might not. Okay, so um, and I also include this really beautiful fan art from like season 1. That's just like a month season 1. That's really nice. Like I don't know, their artists are really good and they deserve a lot more like a lot more props. So anyway, one thing I need to happen is the best meal reveal. Sydney has talked to like Carmy making the best meal she's ever had, like 2 times with 2 separate people that are also in Carmy's life. So we need that to be revealed. I need Sydney to tell that to Carmy stat. Like that needs to happen in this final season, allegedly, of The Bear. Or maybe he knows. Like I don't know. I don't know how they're gonna do it, but I need some sort of reveal of that. And like also I need like more of a clarification on what they are to each other. At least I need the implication that it could be, if it is platonic, tell me. If it is romantic, it better be both or neither something in between. Like I need more of an explicit note of like what they mean to each other. Because they like skirt around it a lot. They imply it. It's been a consistent thing over the 4 seasons, so more clarification on that. It would be nice. I don't think it's gonna happen just because of how the framing of season 5 is going. Like, spoiler alert, the implication that it's gonna take place over one day, all 8 episodes. So I don't know if that'll actually happen. But I really wish that Carmy could have met some of Sydney's family, because Sydney has met a lot of Carmy's family. Again, there's like the idea of Sydney being his muse, and I would like Carmy to like have some sort of realization about that. That would be really cool. Um, and then there's like a lot of like, like subliminal messages, like hidden things within the show, and I need more clarification on those. I don't know how to pronounce this word. It's like legendarian or something. But yeah, just like it's another word to describe like sleight of hand. They mentioned this concept in like season 3, and how it's like important to like have sleight of hand within your cooking and like do little magic tricks within your cooking. But then there's some magic tricks in like how they frame the show and like a lot of the scenes within the show. So if that could be revealed, that would be great. I talked about like the scrunchie that Carmi for some reason has in his possession. Like how do you get this scrunchie? Or like the prayer card and stuff like that. Anyway, last thing would be like what the partnership means. Like, is it something like what is the point of a partnership? Which I mentioned earlier is like a thematic element, like if it's gonna be something outside of work, if um, their partnership, the goal of their partnership is to get a star. If it's to start a new project, people are theorizing. I don't know if it'll happen. It would be tea, like that just makes sense, but I don't know if it's actually gonna happen that Carmi's like gonna create a cookbook and that's what he's gonna do instead of like working strictly with the restaurant. But that can be just worked out in the fan fictions, like I don't need that to be for real. But yeah, I just want clarification on like what their partnership can mean in terms of like success. Okay, so then I just have a little my personal inclusion. I made like a little fanfic ending like that. I just wanted to be funny, but that's what I would love to see. Like basically I don't need like a kiss. Like I really would like them to acknowledge that there's more to this relationship than what both of them have been saying, because it's clear that they both like at least have strong feelings. I don't know, like whether that's romantic, platonic, whatever in between, about each other. So like some sort of acknowledgement of that. Whether that's like handhold, please, I'll take a handhold, or like a hug or something. Um, or like a conversation, it doesn't have to be like with physical touch and stuff. But yeah, if you want, you can read that. You don't have to. Okay, so conclusion slide. It's just a nice picture of the cast from I think season 3 or 4. I can't remember. Um, but yeah, like Sydney and Carmy's relationship is like a very important relationship within this show. They are the two leaders of the bear. And like if they're functioning as a good relationship, then that like affects how everybody else is running and like what everybody else can accomplish. So whether it's like platonic, romantic, which I think it is based on the evidence, like it's definitely a very necessary and like important dynamic for the show, and you can't really deny that. To deny that is to like kind of deny the purpose of the show. Again, they like care for each other like through words, actions, um, themes of the show. And I think the implication is that it's more than just platonic, it's care beyond just like a friend would care for one another. It's also interesting that they don't have like a lot of physical contact, which is like it would be like kind of weird if you guys are friends unless there's something more. Unless I mean some people aren't physical with their friends, but like I don't know. It's like an interesting dynamic compared to like everybody else in that kitchen. There's also this argument of like, what was the writer's intent versus how it like actually shows up on screen? Like a big part of this, of course, is going to be like Io and Jeremy, like the actors that play Sydney and Carmy, have like really good chemistry. And it's like really unique. Um, and it shows up on screen, like whether or not you want it to be platonic or not, like their relationship like shows up on screen. So I don't know if, like, as a director, I would probably be like, you guys need to tone it down a little bit. But like, if the director's not saying that, especially like Christopher Storer, that tells me that maybe it's intentional. Like maybe we want to show this dynamic. Ultimately, The Bear is a show about like finding community, um, like a show about family, about how to process your grief, and like part of that is like relying on like the people around you. So I mean, I think like their relationship is also a good way to like address these themes. And of course, like in the current political climate, like social climate, there are like a lot of hate. Like a whole other thing is like how people deny this like the idea that they could be anything but platonic because it's like a interracial relationship, and how like black women like over the course of TV history, like if they're shipped with a guy character, it's automatically no, it has to be platonic because why would he be interested in her? Or even like, why would she be interested in him? But we do see like clear evidence of it, but it's like because the norm on television is like having two white leads as love interests, you, it like a lot of people are quick to deny it. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I think it'd be great if this show didn't like follow the norms of television and like follow through on a dynamic that they've established as being very important, and not necessarily platonic. So, I'll pause here because the next section I'll probably include after um, season or actually, I'll keep going, but this is a section I haven't completed because season 5 hasn't come back. There is like rumors of a movie. I don't think that's actually gonna happen, but if that happens, I'll be back after this. But yeah, so this is just a slide that I'll include with my thoughts from season 5 once it does come out next week. Um, so then, thank you for listening. Please let me know if you have any questions. If I make a YouTube video, please comment below what you thought. Yeah, and then I just have like this brief slide. It's just a bonus slide, but oh yeah, sorry, my resources, you can look at those. Um, I take pride in my resources. And then this is just some beautiful fan art that I like from the show. The top right image is so funny because like someone made this fan art like back in like 2023, and then they're using like a very similar image as the official promotion for season 5 of The Bear. I was like, okay, all right. But yeah, that's like in the top left corner, there's like the tie into Sydney potentially being Carmy's muse. And then the middle one is just a really nice fan art. There's so much you really need to like look out there though. Probably on like TikTok or like Pinterest and stuff to find good fan art. But yeah, there's a lot of beautiful artists like that make work for Sydcarmy that aren't really appreciated. But anyway, thank you for your time and have a great day.